Hey there, welcome back into the College Basketball Bracket Science YouTube channel and now podcast network. I'm your host, Brandon Jadich. Thank you for joining us today. Today we are talking Big East basketball. We're going to go over the Big East power rankings. We're going to go through the rosters of each of these 11 teams. We're going to do our preseason all Big East team, which was about as hard as any conference we've done so far. Now, we're not that deep into it. This is the third conference. I'm sure it's just going to keep getting more and more difficult. But the big story coming into the season, it's UConn and St. John's, and then it's the rest. A big rivalry. UConn, Dan Hurley, St. John's, Rick Pitino, maybe the two best coaches in the sport. They have two top 5 teams going into this upcoming season. So we're going to talk about a little bit of the battle there, maybe who is preferred, St. John's has one of the more talented rosters, maybe not just in the Big East, but in the entire country. UConn has a lot of retention coming back. We know what Dan Hurley can do with that, so we're going to get into all of that today. Before we do, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. We're going to try and be your encyclopedia for this entire college basketball season. Things are heating up. We're doing these Big East, these conference previews every other week. We're recording a podcast, and then once those are over, we're going to do we still got the Big Ten to do. We got the SEC to do, and then our mid-major, give the mid-major program some love. And then we're going to go weekly every single week. And then, of course, obviously, we're going to have more than one episode a week once the season is right around the corner and once the season starts. So it's getting to be an exciting time. So be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, turn on those post notifications so you stay up to date on the college basketball world. And then be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Bracket Science with 2 S's. Also, be sure to, give us a follow on Apple Podcasts and Spotify now, as we do have audio versions available. I know the YouTube's going to be the big thing, so, you can see the visuals, see the graphics. But, if you're on the road or something, be sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That is in the description of this episode, so be sure to go check that out. Alrighty, without further ado, let's dive right into it. Let's go to the power rankings. This should be a shorter podcast today because, quite frankly, there's just not as many teams in the Big East. So starting at number 1. Now, I will remind you, this is going into the season. This is not necessarily where they're going to end the season or where I'm predicting they're going to end the season. This is going into the season. It's St. John's and it's UConn. I put St. John's number 1. Now, here's what I'll say, and it might be a little bit of an unpopular opinion. I'm a little more on the UConn side in terms of national championship, winning the national. I just, something about this roster just seems perfect to me for UConn. Now, going into the year, I will have St. John's ranked higher than UConn. This is because St. John's, they have the most talented roster in all of college basketball, in my opinion. So let's talk about their roster. They bring in Isaiah Sellers from Stanford. They bring in Ian Jackson from North Carolina. We'll talk about him here in a second. Hosan Sanan from Arizona State. He had a good freshman year last year. He's a returning sophomore. They bring in Bryce Hopkins, who is a potential dark horse All-American, player of the year in the Big East caliber kind of player. It's just if he can stay healthy. Can he stay healthy? We saw what he can do at Providence. He transfers over. Can he stay healthy? And then Zuby Ejiofor manning the middle. Big man, probably will be the preseason Big East player of the year. Great defender, probably maybe the favorite for National Defensive Player of the Year. So Isaiah Sellers comes in, Ian Jackson comes in, Hosan Sanan comes in, Bryce Hopkins, 4 transfers who are projected to be in the starting lineup. They also bring in Dylan Mitchell, transfers from Cincinnati, also formerly at Texas. Dylan Mitchell is a freak athlete, so that front court of Bryce Hopkins, Zuby Ejiofor, Dylan Mitchell, that's as good as you're going to find from anyone in the entire country. Ian Jackson is projected to play the point guard. Rick Pitino has said he trusts Ian Jackson to play the point guard. We'll see what he can do stepping into this role. If this roster is lacking one thing, it is a true point guard. Ian Jackson is more of a shooting guard, more of a scorer, as is Hosan Sanan, as is Isaiah Sellers. So we're going to see what they can do with the lack of a true point guard in this system. But if anyone knows what they're doing, it's Rick Pitino. This is the most talented roster in all of college basketball. They also bring in Hanjay Tamba from Weber State, Dylan Darling from Idaho State. This is a great roster. They also have a freshman coming in from Austria. They lose Davon Smith, Kadari Richmond, Aaron Scott, and obviously RJ Lewis after that kind of rough little ending to his career. But St. John's, as talented as they come, they are going to be in the mix yet again for a Big East regular season championship. At number 2, I have UConn, as mentioned. This is 1A and 1B. I like UConn's they're not as talented as St. John's, but just their continuity is a little bit better than St. John's. They also have a true point guard who I am incredibly high on. The transfer from Georgia, Silas Demery. This guy is going to be an absolute dude. He's a big point guard, kind of is very similar to Tristan Newton, who won 2 national championships for this UConn team. Silas Demery, one of my favorite pickups in the entire portal. They also bring in Malachi Smith, who will probably back up Silas Demery. He's a transfer from Dayton, good player in his own right, experienced guy. He'll be a senior this year. That's a good little backcourt addition there. They also retain Solo Ball. Now, what I will say, Solo Ball is going to have to really step up this year. He was supposed to be a breakout guy last year, and he wasn't bad last year. He was really good, but, really good on a mediocre UConn team that was an 8 seed, lost in the round of 32. They were a good team, but obviously not as talented of a team as we've seen in the past. Now that's hard to replicate as they were so good in the past, but Solo Ball is going to have to make a major jump this year for this team to be elite. I believe they will be elite no matter what, but to be elite, national championship, favorite yet again, Solo Ball is going to have to make a huge jump this year. They also bring back Jalen Stewart and Jaden Ross, who will probably be at, the 3. Alex Caravan is back yet again, 2-time national championship winner. He will probably be playing the 4. And then Terrace Reed back for another year. Terrace Reed, I'm curious to see with this being his second year in the system, how big of a jump he can make, because he has got all the talent in the world. So a lot of retention. They bring back 4 guys who were back from last year in their starting lineup with the addition of, a senior, or a junior guard in Silas Demery, and then a senior guard in Malachi Smith. Yeah, this team's got all the they've got all the pieces, including some great freshmen as well. Braylon Mullins coming in, who will probably back up Solo Ball, is kind of what I'm thinking. Maybe he'll start over Jalen Stewart, and Jalen Stewart will come off the bench. I'm curious to see what they do. But Braylon Mullins, 13th ranked recruit in the country. Eric Reeb also is a incoming freshman, 32nd ranked recruit in the country. Jacob Furphy also coming in as a transfer. Alec Melender is another name to know. I know it might sound crazy. He's a transfer from UI Indy, but I've heard good things coming in from Alec Melender. That's kind of been going through the Twitter world that he might be a surprise player. He'll probably be that 3rd string point guard, though. Maybe play some significant minutes once there's in their non-cons game, in their bye games. So UConn at number 2. I like UConn. I think that's probably going to be my bet to win the Big East, will be UConn going into the season. St. John's has the more talented roster, but just putting together, I don't know why, it's just a gut feeling. I have UConn winning the conference this year. All right, Creighton at number 3. No surprise here. They're kind of just the default 3rd place pick right now behind UConn and St. John's. Let's talk about Creighton's roster a little bit. They retained Fedor Zugic, which was a big one here. Then they got a pair of transfers in from Iowa, Josh Dix and Owen Freeman, 2 really highly thought of transfers coming out of Fran McCaffrey's system into Greg McDermott's system, kind of similar systems there. They also bring in Blake Harper from Howard, and then they do retain Jackson McAndrew for his sophomore year, who is looking to make a huge jump. Now, they do lose some big pieces. Obviously, Ryan Kalkbrenner. They lose Stephen Ashworth and Jemiah Neal, who Jemiah Neal, I've said it over and over again, was my most improved player all of last season. He made a huge jump. They won a game in March Madness, but we're a 9 seed. A little bit of a disappointing year, but I think they're going to be back in, the 6, 7, 8 seed range this year, with even, the possibility of getting a little higher, depending on how good Josh Dix and Owen Freeman can be. Jackson McAndrew is going to have to make a jump, as is Fedor Zugic, for this team to be truly elite and to compete with the UConns and St. John's. We know what their home court advantage can do, so those will be fun matchups no matter what. They also retain Jason Green and Ty Davis. They also got a few more transfers in Austin Schwartz from Miami, Nick Graves from Charlotte, and then they also have Hudson Greer coming in. So should be a fun team yet again, just kind of that default 3rd place team right now. The default 4th place team as of this moment is Marquette. Now, Marquette, once again, does not go to the transfer portal, which is kind of what's keeping them out of the top of this, out of the top of the league. Now, they came off firing last year. They got in the top 10 in the country. Cam Jones was looking like a player of the year sort of candidate, They were a well-coached team. They just didn't have the talent, quite frankly, to match up with some of these other top dogs. They ended up getting a 7 seed, lost to New Mexico. I think this team's going to be very similar again this year. I think this team's good enough to get in March Madness. It's just, I think they're going to have a star who we'll talk about being Chase Ross. Chase Ross is going to be that guy who steps up every year. Marquette has a guy that steps up and is an elite guard. They had Tyler Kolek. Tyler Kolek leaves. Cam Jones steps in. I think Cam Jones, once he leaves, I think it's going to be Chase Ross. He is an elite defender, a freak athlete. They also bring back Sean Jones, who missed last year with an injury, little point guard. He's fast. He kind of made some noise a couple of years ago before getting hurt. Zayd Lowry back, Trey Norman back. Royce Parham is back. Royce Parham's going to be the guy this year that really needs to, step in. He'll be replacing David Joplin as that probably the 4-man this year. He's going to have to really step up and produce on the offensive end. We know what he can do. He's a highly thought of recruit. He's just going to have to, really, really fill into form here. And then Ben Gold is also back from another year. They bring in 4 freshmen, but 0 transfers. So we'll see their floor is probably fairly high, being Marquette, being Shaka Smart, a lot of retention. It's just their ceiling's a little limited without, the elite NBA talents. Chase Ross, the guy to know for this Marquette team, though. All right, here's where it gets a little dicey for the Big East. At number 5, I got Providence. Providence has had a very sneaky good offseason under Kim English. They bring in Daquan Davis from Florida State. They bring in Jason Edwards from Vanderbilt. Know the name Jason Edwards, a little guard kind of guy, just scores the ball like crazy. He averaged 19 points per game in his freshman year, then transferred to Vanderbilt, averaged 17 a game last year. Jason Edwards is going to be a known commodity in the Big East this year. Know the name Jason Edwards. We'll talk about him here a little more in a little bit. They also bring in Jalen Sellers from UCF. He had battled some injuries last year, but a really talented player. They bring in Duncan Powell from Georgia Tech, and then I'm not even going to pronounce the last name. It's Oswin. I guess I will try. Aaron Woonsay, I believe is how it's pronounced. He is back for another year for Providence and for Kim English. Expect him to make a big jump. He's a good player. He's a really good player. So 4 transfers in this starting lineup should be a really fun team. Bensley Joseph also comes in, or excuse me, he was here last year, but he's back for another year. Bensley Joseph, an experienced guy. It's a decent team. It's a decent roster. That starting 5 is good. Expect Duncan Powell to make a big jump from last year at Georgia Tech. He's got some talent. Jason Edwards, they have a legit star. Jason Edwards is a star. He was a star on a team that made the NCAA tournament last year in the SEC for Vanderbilt. He's going to transfer over perfectly, in my opinion, to this Providence team that always has fairly good guards, him and Bensley Joseph and Daquan Davis. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun team. I'm expecting Providence to, be towards that bubble of the NCAA tournament. At number 6, I got Georgetown. Yes, we're not going to Villanova or Xavier yet. We're going to talk about Georgetown. Georgetown has a sneaky, pretty good roster. Georgetown kind of looking to just get their brand back as of right now. Georgetown has not been an at-large team in a long time. They made that one tournament under Patrick Ewing where they randomly won the Big East tournament. But Georgetown, they bring back Malik Mack. He's the guy to know. Malik Mack, the transfer from Harvard a couple years ago. He's back for another year. He's going to be their guy this year. They also bring in Deshaun Harris-Smith from Maryland. They bring in KJ Lewis from Arizona. They bring in Langston Love from Baylor. Vincent Iwuchukwu from St. John's. A lot of guys with high major experience. They also bring in Isaiah Abraham, who was a freshman last year at UConn. He transfers in. They bring in Jeremiah Williams from Rutgers. So a ton of experienced pieces. This team could be good. This team could be really good. Now, Micah Peavy was awesome last year for Georgetown. They lose him. They also lose Thomas Sorber, who they thought they were going to have for a couple of years, but he ended up just being awesome. So he goes to the NBA. Micah Peavy is out of eligibility. So they replace this. It seems they're starting to get some money in the NIL department, as they should. It's Georgetown. They're a big brand in college basketball. Watch out for Georgetown this year. They have a sneaky good team under Ed Cooley. Will this be the year that they, kind of break through? If they're in that 5-6 range, as of right now, I got Providence and Georgetown. It's probably those next 5 teams, Providence, Georgetown, Villanova, Butler, Xavier, battling for those top half spots, the 5 and 6 spot in the Big East, could be the difference in making the NCAA tournament and missing the NCAA tournament. So those 5 teams probably battling for those 2 spots. I got it as Providence and Georgetown right now. All right, up next is Villanova. Villanova in the 7 spot. Villanova fans might not like this, but this roster does not look great. It does not look great at all. A lot of, low major, mid-major guys transferring up, or the guys that came with Coach Willard. This will be year 1 under Coach Willard. guys that transfer with them didn't really play last year, so we'll see how it comes together. They bring in Bryce Lindsey from James Madison. James Madison was a solid team last year. Tyler Perkins is back for another year, so a little bit of retention there. He should be a solid piece. Zion Stanford transfers in from Temple. They bring in Matthew Hodge. Braden Pierce is transferring in from Maryland. He transfers with Coach Willard there. Didn't play a ton last year for that Maryland team that really lacked depth. Devin Askew transfers in from Long Beach State. So a lot of low major guys, transferring up. They got some high school recruits coming in, but it seems like it's going to kind of be a build from the bottom sort of thing for Kevin Willard. They bring in Duke Brennan and Tafara Gapare. Just kind of a bleak roster, in my opinion. Willard's a good coach. He's won in the Big East. He won at Seton Hall. He's won in the Big Ten. He won at Maryland. I don't know if they're lacking in money. I saw an interview with him with John Rothstein over at CBS, who does a great job if you're interested in that kind of stuff. He does a lot of coach interviews. Let's go check that out. But watched him, kind of interview, and Rothstein asked him about the roster. He's like, we're trying to build the Villanova brand, building it up. We didn't really utilize the transfer portal and buy those high end. I was like, it's kind of strange in year one where you really want to get that fan base going and develop more money for the NIL collective. But it just looks like a bleak roster. This roster does not look good. Would not be surprised if this was a disappointing first year under Kevin Willard, but he's a good coach. Maybe he knows what he's doing and can put this thing together. All right, at number 8, I have Butler under Thad Matta, just always kind of towards the bottom, it seems, of the Big East. That being said, they have a decent chance this year, in my opinion. I say that every year about Butler. They're always my sleeper, and it never works out. So they have Jamie Kaiser coming back for another year, who's going to be a big piece. They also bring in Michael Ajayi from Gonzaga. Remember Michael Ajayi? He was a transfer from Pepperdine to Gonzaga last year, was supposed to really make some noise, and he didn't do much of anything. This is a better fit, kind of a better program, in my opinion, for Michael Ajayi to go to for his level. He could really pop off and make a big step. They also bring in Johan Traore from SMU, Drayton Jones from South Carolina State. They also do retain a few pieces under Thad Matta. Finley Bizjack is back for another year. As we mentioned, Jamie Kaiser could be a fun team. It's kind of just a wait and see sort of approach. It just depends on how good Jamie Kaiser and Michael Ajayi are. Those two guys, though, could produce a decent little team that wins a few games at home against, some of those top dogs, in my opinion. All right, next up is Xavier. Yes, Xavier way down the list. Surprising? Yeah, me too. I thought Xavier was, you bring in a hot new name like Richard Pitino, and they have a bad roster. That's all you can say about them. This roster is not very good whatsoever. In fact, it's pretty ugly. Roddy Anderson III is back for he missed a lot of the season last year with an injury. He was the former transfer from Boise State. He started on an NCAA tournament team at Boise State, so I think what you want there. I thought he was overrated at Boise State, but we'll see. They also bring in a guy with one of the best names in the country, All Right. Yes, first name All, last name Right. He transfers in from Valparaiso. They bring in Philip Boroviasin. It's something like that. He is a transfer from New Mexico. He follows Rich Pitino there. He might be their best player. Anthony Robinson also transfers in from Virginia. Didn't play a huge role last year, and then Pape Ndaye transfers in from UNLV. So, he's kind of leaning into this West Coast sort of thing. He's got a transfer in from Montana with Malik Moore. He also brings in Jovan Milicevic from New Mexico with him to Xavier. So we're going to see kind of a wait and see approach with this roster. You say the names and you just don't really recognize them. Now, Rich Pitino's a good coach. He won in the Big Ten under with Minnesota. Didn't do a horrible job there. So, but this is a heavy turnover year. Xavier loses Davion McKnight, Dante Maddox Jr., Marcus Foster, Jerome Hunter, Zach Fremantle, all from that tournament team last year that won a game in the first 4. So kind of a rebuild year for Richard Pitino. Thought he would have put together a better roster than this. It doesn't look too great, but it's a wait and see approach. All right, next up is Chris Holtmann and DePaul. DePaul not predicted in the last spot thanks to Seton Hall this year. DePaul actually has some retention coming in this year. CJ Gunn back for another year. Layden Blocker back for another year. It's DePaul. You can't expect to do a ton. They bring in RJ Smith from Colorado. Kaman Maker comes in as well. DePaul has an opportunity with how, this is kind of their window of opportunity with Villanova looking like it might be a down year, Xavier looking like it's going to be a down year. Butler is, seems to have a talented roster, but underperform just about every year. DePaul could quietly, make some noise with Villanova and Xavier. Now, I'm not saying they're going to get, they're not going to be in the top half of the conference. If they are, count me wrong. It's not going to happen. But they have a chance to, end up being, the 8th best team in the Big East, just kind of start climbing up. They were in the semifinals of the Big East tournament last year. Anything can happen in the Big East tournament. They're starting to, they got a good coach. And that just shows what the difference has been for DePaul. Chris Holtmann did a solid job last year. He's got something to build upon. It seems like it's been very rewarding for him. So they have a chance, finish 7, 8, 9. They're not going to finish 7. That's a little over the top. But, if they get into that 8, 9 range, it'll be a successful season for DePaul. Maybe get one random good high school recruit in the next couple years under Chris Holtmann. These high school recruits, they're not going to the Dukes unless you're, Caden Boozer anymore. If you're a 40th ranked recruit, they're not going to Duke or Kentucky anymore because they're coming through the transfer portal. They got other players coming through the transfer portal. So Chris Holtmann can use that as leverage. Get him to DePaul, get him to Chicago. That could be something to watch. All righty. And in the 11 spot, Seton Hall. Seton Hall is in the 11 spot this year. No surprise there. Seton Hall said they were going to invest some money into Shaheen Holloway after last year's disaster. It seems they didn't. This roster doesn't even look better than last year's, in my opinion. They bring in AJ Stanton-McRae from Miami. They bring in TJ Simpkins from Elon, Elijah Fisher from Pacific, and Adam Clark from Merrimack, who will probably all start. And then Godswill Arian, I believe is how it's pronounced. He's back for another year, a little bit of retention there, but this roster does not look good whatsoever. Shaheen Holloway is back up against the fences yet again. They're just basically the default last place team right now. After winning the NIT 2 years ago, why is Seton Hall? I don't know. I know it's easier said than done, but you just got to invest. You got a good coach in Shaheen Holloway. You got to bring in some money somehow to be able to produce a solid roster. Alrighty, that is the power rankings. St. John's in the 1 spot, UConn 2, Creighton 3, Marquette 4, Providence 5, Georgetown 6, Villanova 7, 8, Butler 9, Xavier 10, DePaul 11, Seton Hall. I know Villanova fans and Xavier fans are not going to be happy. I apologize, but don't want to give you false hope and put you in the, in the 5 spot or something. It just doesn't look like a great roster to me. It's a great brand, great home court advantage. So their ceiling or their floors are a little higher than most, but yeah, this is going into the season and their rosters just don't look too spectacular, but they got good coaches. So we will see. All right, let's move into our preseason All Big East team. This was the hardest one to do. In fact, I made it a second team down there just because I couldn't leave these guys off. I put in Chase Ross. Now this is kind of just a, just a system thing with Shaka Smart. As we mentioned, Cam Jones was awesome last year. I don't know why Chase Ross isn't getting as much hype as he should be. He's a really, really good player. I think Chase Ross is probably going to be, Marquette's pretty much everything this year. So yeah, he's going to be a stat sheet monster. I put in Bryce Hopkins, which I'm a little bit worried about. He is, in my opinion, he's one of the 5 best, stat sheet guys in the Big East. Just if he can stay healthy. He just has not been able to stay healthy. Owen Freeman for Creighton, the transfer from Iowa. He's a big guy who averaged, I believe, 16-8 or 16-9 last year. It's a perfect fit in Greg McDermott's system. He's going to replace Ryan Kalkbrenner. I think he's going to have a really good year. Alex Caravan also on here. As you can see, I'm kind of saying all these like, I'm not 100% sure who UConn's best player is going to be. If you wanted to throw solo ball on here, you could do the same. You could do that as mentioned. I think he's going to make a big jump. I think Silas Demery's awesome. You could flip him on here. So this was the hardest one to do. Zuby Ejiofor was the easiest one to put on here. He would be my player of the year in the preseason for the Big East. In fact, he probably will be the preseason Big East player of the year. But I wanted to get Jason Edwards on here, but I wanted to put him on here instead of Bryce Hopkins just because the injury thing. But Bryce Hopkins is so good, and you can't replace any of these other guys. Yeah, so Jason Edwards deserves a spot on here. He's my honorable mention for sure. We mentioned Silas Demery and solo ball. Also Malik Mack from Georgetown. Wanted to throw him on here. I expect him to make a big improvement here. then Josh Dix, I also threw on here because he could be Creighton's best player, as could Jackson McAndrew. I put Owen Freeman. I'm not confident in this list whatsoever, but this is what I landed on. So first and second team, all Big East. All right, it was a quick one. That's going to do it. Only 11 teams to talk about today. We got it in under a half an hour. I'm curious to hear what everyone's Big East power rankings are, because this was the conference I struggled with the most. Pencil in St. John's or UConn at the 1 and the 2 spot. Pencil in probably Creighton at the 3 and Marquette at the 4. From there, it's wide open. Now you probably pencil in Seton Hall last and probably DePaul second to last. But those middle 5, I'm kind of curious to see if I'm in the minority there or what. But thanks to everyone for tuning in. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. More of these are coming. We'll be back in a couple weeks here to do the Big Ten. It'll be a lot longer of an episode, talking about 18 teams, and I think the Big Ten might be the best conference in college basketball this year. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Be on the lookout for that. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Bracket Science with 2 S's. Remember to subscribe to the show on Apple and Spotify. And everyone have a great rest of their week. Take care. See you later.